Welcome, everyone. Welcome those of you who are here in person. Welcome those who are joining us through the live stream. I have my mic on. We're grateful that you are here today for this history presentation. Our very own Bethlehem historian, John Schmeelk, will be leading us. And so without further ado, take it away.
I am here, and guess what? I will unmask. All right, I didn't intend to be that flamboyant. Sorry about that.
You said one thing. You said one of us said without further ado. Ado is a really good world first word. I'm just going to say that.
Well, the real reason I accepted this job is because I figured COVID would last this long and I could talk without a mask. All right. Let's start. I'm just going to run through a couple of slides because I want to just explain what we are and are not going to do. And so we are celebrating our 100th, but the question is, when did the 100th, how do you count it? So they'll flip to the next slide, you see, or was the date 1921? And it all depends on many, many things. As you can see, that we have all these dates. In July, you had the first meeting to organize the church. On August 4th of 21, we had a charter signing. They had the first worship service. All right, we're getting going on August 7th. The Constitution was adopted on the 18th. They extended a call to a pastor in late September. They're moving right along. The one thing I take from all of these dates, and as fast and as closely grouped as they are, is these people were eager, enthusiastic, hopeful, and just a little bit unsure, as we all are. On January 2nd of 22, you had the first annual Congregational meeting and election of officers. By July, it was incorporated as part of the Buffalo Synod. I'll get into the Synod business and where we were connected later on a little bit. On August 22nd, we have the laying of the first cornerstone. We have two. And on March 11th, 23, the building was completed. So pick a date as to when our 100th started, and that's exactly what we did. Okay, Bob. Now, the whole thing, and I don't need any notes for this, as you all know, church is not a place, church is not a building, church is people. And I wouldn't be able to do any kind of a job up here without the fantastic amount of work that the 100th Anniversary Committee has done. I don't know if we had to pay them, you wouldn't want to pay for all the hours they put in. I was going to show you a representative sample of all of the pictures that Bob Stock at least has accumulated. I don't know if he went out and got them all, but you would be here until tomorrow morning. And with that in mind, I really urge you all, take advantage of the computer that we have out there and search the files. They're fun. You may get lost for a long time. I did. But the church is people. It has always been people. And people, most of the important ones, I couldn't name if I wanted to, because they do things behind the scenes. In the past several years, I have come down to this building often during the week to look at this, to do that, often to find that this and that is already done. By who? We don't know. But without all the people, this place wouldn't be what it is. So we are the people of the church. Now, a brief review of the history of how we got here. We are joined to two other churches, and the first church is, of course, Emmanuel in Webster. And it's interesting, in 1868, they were not where they are now. They were on the corner of 5 Mile Line Road. They moved east. And during that time, about 20 years later, they wound up where they are now. But before that time, about the middle of it, BLC Penfield came into being in 1878. And we say, oh, it's on Plank Road. That road, even into the 1920s, was called Tract Road. Now, why would you change the name, and why is it important to call it Plank? It's part of the reason that you wound up with a church down here as well. The original location of Emmanuel, in relation to Penfield, in relation to here, they're all a little over 8 miles apart from each other. If you wanted to travel 1800s roads over 8 miles in all kinds of weather, you wouldn't want to do it. You wouldn't want to do it. And so, each of these churches grew out of the other and often intercommuned. Now, in the last decades here, we have fallen away from that. And it's only our 100th which has brought that back again. I know we recently had a canceled event, but we will uncancel as soon as we can. So the historical background, of course, here is that with the cooperation, suggestion, and leadership of the pastor in Penfield, this church group, congregation, was formed. And as you saw by the dates, it was formed very quickly. And I'd just like to also set in motion and in your minds the idea of what was going on through the decades in those 100 years. We look now, right, there's a terrible thing going on in Europe. We've had this pandemic for over 2 years. We think the world is frightening and, not very bright looking. Well, let's go and look. Oh, there's the map. And it doesn't really show, but I think you guys know the relationship of those three churches. The population of Fairport, yes, Pastor?
That's what I want to ask you.
Yes.
Go.
Okay. The first Emmanuel used to be way over here. It is now here. Plank Road is here, and we're down here. But they're all 8 miles, roughly, from each other. The population, why Fairport and why then? I mean, the relationship between Webster and Penfield happened quickly, but between 1910 and 1920, Fairport experienced its largest population growth in percentage or in absolute numbers ever. And of course, nobody thought it was going to stop. But it kind of did. It kind of did. It remained at that level, actually sinking just a little bit over the years. But I mean, it was very interesting that, wow, it's growing like crazy. We need to establish another church there. And they did a census, and they found a lot of people who were interested in this immediate area of attending a Lutheran church. Now, there was a controversy as to whether or not to put the word German in it, and the first name for this church did not have German. Plank Road did. We didn't. It was English. But look at it. It's early 1920s. There's not a lot of favorable opinion about Germans or German traditions around in the United States after World War I. So for an unpopular tradition, it got off to a roaring start. But let's look at the decades, and we'll see that at the end of the 20s, everybody thought things were going well, right? It's boom time, everything's going great. And along came October of 1929, and the bottom kind of fell out of everything. It didn't hurt initially Fairport as much as one might think. It wasn't then as dependent on industry. It was still largely a farming community, but there was no area of the economy that didn't suffer from the Depression. So you went through the 30s, and it certainly didn't look very bright economically, nor did it look very bright overseas. And of course, we know what happened with the 40s. The 40s caused economic revival, but it was a tremendous cost. It was a world war, and we were involved, and we lost many people. What happened to the people of BLC? How did they react? We'll talk about it. The 50s, everybody wanted to get back to normal. We want to get back to normal. It's not going to happen. The world changed. There was Korea, an undeclared war with what kind of goals? And it really just underlined the danger of the Cold War and nuclear war. Well, we transitioned into the 60s. Why be without a war? Vietnam, probably even more complicated. And the space program and civil rights, all of society is really emotionally involved. In the 70s, we try to get back. No. The Cold War goes on. The biggest event politically, of course, is Watergate. Maybe tainted our politics for generations. The 80s, wow, we're back to disease. AIDS, and we certainly didn't know a lot about that for a long time. It was a death sentence. It isn't now, but it isn't completely under control either. And perhaps we shouldn't think that diseases at any time will be completely under control. 90s, the internet, and of course 2000, then you got 9/11. And today you have the pandemic. And how does all of this fit into, and now we'll go through chronologically more or less the way the church and the people of God here respond. So the first thing they did in this era between the 20s and 30s, of course, was to get started. And they got started due to the pastor from BLC, BLC Penfield. And during this 20-year period, we had a couple of anniversaries that kind of brackets the era. It's kind of funny, Pastor Hoffman from Penfield was very instrumental in helping us set up here. And we had a lot of, matter of fact, all the Lutheran churches around here had a lot of connections to Canada at the time. Not so much now, but it was quite common. When we opened the time capsule, the earliest one from this immediate time period, we found out that one of the speakers at the dedication was from Canada, and he spoke in German. What else would he do? So he got us started and rapidly and eagerly turned it over and suggested that we call a pastor. And our first pastor called here is Pastor Schultz. And he is around, as you see, for a really decent amount of time. So he brackets this area of, wow, great expectations, things are going to grow, things are going to happen, 1922 to 1936. Now the church itself, the original church, is completed in 1923. So where were they before that? There you see the pastor and his family. Oh, and one thing I have to say about pastors, I will mention virtually all that we've had, and there are slides for all of them. There aren't for assistant and associates, but I'll mention their names at least at the end. They come with varying degrees of likability throughout the greater congregation. However, I would say that there probably wasn't a single one of them that didn't touch one, probably many more people in a way that maybe the majority didn't. So all of them, despite their length of service or their popularity at the time, were all very important to our growth. Excuse me. It's just like any kind of vegetation. If you don't give it any strain, it isn't a very strong plant. Strains help build character. The first service was held in the town hall, and you see that picture on the left. But guess what? They charged too much money, And so they moved to that second location. But for only being formed in 1922, to have the building erected and done by 1923 at the cost of several $1,000s, and initially they raised quickly $1,700, but the whole thing cost about $4,000. What does that equal in money today? Multiply anything back then by about 14, and you get what it cost then. And why was the cost that relatively low? Because then and now, an awful lot of the work was done by people in the congregation. How we would have gotten by without that, I really don't know. It was 40 by 60. It was heated by wood. And there's the picture of it. And it fronted on Church Street. And it wasn't on the corner. There was a house on the corner. And thank goodness for Bob. He figured this out. The trail of the properties, how we came by them, and where they are is a bit of a mystery that it was a little difficult to untangle. In fact, one of the buildings that we owned early on, later records say we sold, but when it came back, because we still own it today, is lost in the mists of time. Or the report of our selling it is wrong. Not exactly sure. Now, you see the church on Church Street, and then you see 3 buildings on Perrin. Okay, guess what? It's 4 properties. In between the first 2, where you see empty lot, in between 48 and 42, that's one of the properties. There was never a building there. So later on, when we talk about merging 3 properties, you think those 3 houses are gone. No. The one, number 40, is still there. It's right over here. It's the one we own and rent out. So, this is the first parsonage, which is the home that I just described that we still own. And it was purchased in November. And later on, as you see the date there, a second parsonage was purchased. And as I said, 46 is an empty lot. Now, this second one is a large house, and what's really cool about it is a very, very large garage. We counted the doors on the garage, 4 cars. 4-car garage. Wish we had one of those. Of course, I don't have 4 cars, but I got enough junk to fill a 4-car garage. There's no problem there, and I'm sure we did as well. The one thing I can say after all the years I've been here and connected with property and cleanup crews is we've thrown away more stuff than we now own. Thank goodness. And we're sticking with property, and you see those trees right there. That's in that lot that has no building. And here are still some more pictures, and you see the church and just the surroundings, the way they look. They don't look the way we think of now at all. Anybody unclear on this situation here? It's easy to get confused with this. If Bob hadn't done this for us, I don't think by just mere description we ever would have figured it out. Let's look at the, are we going to get to, yeah, let's go to the interior of the parish house. The parish house was very big, had very big rooms. They had offices, they had classrooms. And you see from the pictures, these are generous sized rooms. I think there were about 9 of them. And later on, because this isn't very early and I kind of jumped a bit in time, the family we had here then and the pastor had boys, many boys. And as you see, they made ample use of the attic. There's a ping pong table and other items that young boys might delight in. And the basement, not very pretty, but when do teenage boys need prettiness to have a ball? So they were very active. And as they grew older, maybe they needed some of those garage spaces for extra vehicles. Now, in 1969, I'm doing all the building to get the building out of the way. So we're jumping time. In 1967, the three, so that's the two parcels with buildings on them and the one with nothing on it, were merged into one in anticipation of an expansion of the church. And you see the 69 expansion with our lovely ramp, which we were so proud of at the time. And if you were ever an usher or ever had to help someone in a wheelchair in winter going up or down that ramp, it was an adventure. As I found out many years ago, my best friend at the time, wheelchair-bound, very heavy man, and we didn't want to take a day trip to Niagara Falls because none of the facilities were handicapped ready. And the first year they said they were, we went. And they made very steep pathways to restrooms, which indeed inside were handicapped accessible. A doorway to get in the building wasn't, but I mean, no big deal. Anyway, yeah, the ramp was ahead of its time, and we were kind of a pioneer at that time for being accessible to people. But again, we had something better in mind later on. What you see now is the overall, and I love that aerial picture. We really have grown into a multi-shaped building. Yeah.
But there was a house on the corner.
There was a house on the corner. That was taken down. They were all taken down. When they merged the three properties, shortly after that, they removed the one on the corner. All right, there's nothing in the middle. It's that empty lot. And the big parish house. That's how we got it. Yeah. Okay.
And he also owned all the property that is now Brooks Hill.
Okay, so Jerry Ann is saying that the one on the corner was owned by Brooks, also owned property on what is now Brooks Hill?
Where Brooks Hill School is.
Where Brooks Hill School is.
So the house next to it, let's say it this way. The house on the far right, is that the
one on the far right is the one that we still have and is the rental property.
So when the driveway was
Yeah.
Deteriorating a few years ago, the house, you could see the foundation
Yes.
of the house.
Yeah, some of the foundation is in our parking lot.
So
Yes.
That's where.
Yes, that's where the house was. Yeah. And just to add something we didn't have in here, and I didn't have in plan to talk about at all, the house beyond our rental at one time we also owned. And we did that because, if you'll go on to the next one, the full size we are now, at the time, Fairport Village had very strict zoning, and we weren't going to be allowed to do this magnificent building we have here because we were encroaching on too much green space. And so we would have to have taken down the rental and the one next to that to provide the proper percentage of green space. And right near the end of that meeting, a member of the board that was deciding our fate said, of course, you're not paying taxes on those two properties. And they said, and we said, oh yeah, we are. And suddenly the amount of green space didn't matter anymore. The ways of politics and churches. Okay, there's the first, again, picture of the first building and the side entrance. And again, the ramp and the final renovations. I see Bob Stock just walked in, and he is just delighted with all our changes and renovations and additions because it's caused us no end of interesting problems with things that don't match up with each other and all the different pieces of the building. Okay, so the building is finished in 1923. 9 years later, look what they do. They change it. The arched asp and the 3 stained glass windows were added. The configuration was changed, and hopefully the heating got a little better. And again, after only 9 years in existence as a building, this is a pretty fast move, and it's in 32. All right, there's no doubt the Depression's working, and still they're able to do this. Why did we include the picture on the right? The 3 stained glass windows, which were originally the main focus of the church. Look over here by the organ. That's where they are now.
So John,
Yes?
the lights in that last picture, they're the ones out in the north end?
Beg your pardon?
The lights in the original 1932, are they in the north end?
Yes. Yes. Oh, the question was about the lights in the picture, in the 1932 picture. Yes. We're pretty good at saving almost everything. Right, Matt? He and a couple of property guys filled up an entire disposal container a few weeks ago with surplus stuff that we are storing. Then the other addition, when we turned the sanctuary, was the new asp and the curved wall and the stained glass windows, which of course is now our focus of worship every time you come in. Of course, originally the stained glass windows were not lit. I believe that was funded by the Kellos, and we've only had one problem with the lights in there, and it was easily fixed, and the repairman told us, don't worry about it, they may last a very long time, which is always very good news. Picture on the left shows the original altar arrangement and the altar railing. When you come in from Perrin Street through the new narthex, if you look up above, that's where the altar railing is. It's also where we hid the other time capsule, which was very clever. Okay. Let's talk about the 40s and the 50s. Let me see what I got here. I have more pieces of paper. I'm going to put this down for a second. Quit talking amongst yourselves. All righty. What do we got here? Yep. I thought I had more red ink stuff. I do a lot of presentations, and I do things in red because I want to follow that line, but I guess I forgot to include that second one. It's okay. Okay, let's go. So Pastor Schultz went until 1936, right? Well, in 1937, the church became self-sustaining. So for the first years of our existence, we were helped out by other churches maintaining a financial equilibrium. By 37, we said, thanks, but we don't need it anymore, for which I'm sure they all said, oh my gosh, thank you, because we need the bucks ourselves. In 1941, they had a 20th anniversary, and the goal, of course, was to become debt-free. Kind of ambitious to say in 1941. Of course, when they said that, they didn't know we were going to be involved in a world war. So the 20th anniversary was a very joyous one, but it was modest in scope. And the next period of time, from 41 to 72, just look at that bracket. That includes the 25th, the 30th, and the 50th anniversary. Okay. Pages. I'm confusing myself. Come on, John. Well, if you didn't know I was human before, you sure know it now. That's the one I'm after. Okay. In the original building, we were gifted pews, a baptismal font, and a pipe organ from Concordia Lutheran Church in Rochester. That didn't hang around long, and I don't know why. Maybe it wasn't in good shape, because in 1932 we had a two-manual electric organ. And somebody named Edith Banhold was the organist. Anybody knows that who she became? Yeah, Edith Mosier, and one of the most valuable people. And again, for the dedication of the building after the renovation, we had two services, one in the morning, and that was officiated by a pastor from Roseland, Penfield, BLC, and another who was the, I believe, brother-in-law of Pastor Schultz out of Buffalo, and that was in the evening. By that time, the congregation had grown to over 300 baptized members. There was a booster club, junior and senior Luther leagues, and in 1940, a Women's Missionary Society was formed. At that time, we were a member of the American Lutheran Church. Therefore, we were associated with Buffalo. Most of the Lutheran churches in the area were LCA, and eventually they merged. I mean, when I was growing up and was going to church regularly in New Jersey, the only thing I remembered was the changing of hymnals, as, thank goodness, Lutheran churches were reuniting. The reason they were so splintered in the first place was, of course, when you came over from wherever you came over, you did it your way. And so at one point, there were probably 100 different Lutheran churches. It's nice to get a little more camaraderie and a little more uniformity in it. The one thing I found that was interesting, and we don't do this anymore, we might have something that passes for annual dinners, but in 1941, they made a big deal out of their annual dinner. It's a clam chowder dinner. I didn't know Rochester area was known for clams. But just shows you what you're going to get. VBS was begun in 1941. And they wanted to be debt-free by then. They didn't make it. I wonder why. During that period, as you see, we have pictures of 6 different pastors. So in that, they served roughly, 5 years apiece? And we have, notice he goes through most of the war. So he follows Pastor Schultz. He goes from 36 to 44. A very interesting time. And what do you do during the war besides tend the flock here at BLC? Well, this pastor was the chairman of the local Red Cross. Very active with the general community. He is succeeded by Reverend Rusner, who is around for our 25th. And guess what? It's time for another reorganization, redecoration of the church. And we get a new oil furnace. It's always nice to be warm. Always nice to be warm. And he was only here for 3 years, and it's too bad he didn't hang on for one more year, because in 1948, BLC is debt-free. Wow. Not bad for going through the war. And progress is made. Plans are looked ahead for expansion, even at this early date. Now, the next pastor, Ragoff, was here for the 30th anniversary and a cornerstone laying. And like a lot of times, it's interesting. The church is people. And of course, if you have a spellbinding pastor, you're going to have a lot of people in the church. But really, it's the people, not the pastor. However, this pastor's first Sunday here had all of 68 people in attendance, which is less than the first service this church had when it met in the town hall in 1921. It didn't stay that way for long, though. It didn't stay that way at all, at all. I believe, if my pages aren't too mixed up, that the Sunday school rapidly expanded. It had 100 students with 16 teachers. Average attendance was 85. VBS was back, and they started 2 services on Sunday, which says something's going right. Something is very definitely going right. Expansion plans were laid in 1955, which is just before Dallas Adler, and I got to talk about him a bit more than the others. Oh, by the way, if you wanted to be around in the middle 50s, you want to be in confirmation class, catechism class, 9:30 on Saturday morning. I'm sure you're all going to give that up. You wished you were there, right? No? Okay. I should also say, at this same time, somebody sitting here right today, Mr. Rasbeck, I think, was married here in 1957, just before Reverend Dallas Adler is brought into our congregation. Now, he comes about as close to a popular and a spellbinder as you're going to have. Membership rose to 440 members. His family is extremely musical. And you see the 5 sons listed on there. And then the last one in this sequence is Pastor Jorgensen. Was with us for 8 years. And here you go again, the ups and downs of the church. The size shrinks, and then it comes back up again. But it was under Jorgensen that the properties were merged. It was under Jorgensen that the new office space and the wings were planned. And in 1970 and 71, the parish house and the old parsonage were torn down. So, you wanted to know when? That's when. And in 71, September, a new education wing was added. That was when we got the ramp. Also got a new constitution. I worked on the last one. It's no fun. It's no fun. And in January of 72, there was an anniversary reunion dinner. And it was catered by the people from Roseland. One of the recorded intercongregational activities that happened. All right, let's stop there because it's really of one piece. Here we have a picture of pastors who made it to the 50th. The lone picture, Paul Adler. He is the son of Dallas Adler. He's also a pastor, and he was scheduled to visit here. That plan, thank you, pandemic, has changed. This is why you got to talk about. There was a very musical family. All the boys played instruments. They also did a lot of boy things, which is what got a lot of involvement from the congregation. And they started the tradition of 4th of July BLC floats. And we have gone back to that at times, not very consistently. but I thought that was really something. Their music was everywhere. There you see the boys singing on the upper right. The upper left and lower right, yep, they had a German band. Why not? I think we should all have an event like that. Gentlemen, buy your hats. When he left, it was not only with sadness in the congregation, he left despite the veto of his family. And his last service here was amply watered with tears. A very, very popular pastor. And then we entered a fallow age, 2 years with different interims. And of course, you know what happens when that happens. Membership drops off, and in came this young kid with the sideburns, the big hair, and he hung around too long. Look at the way we aged that guy. I mean, we really took him over the hurdles. But in the 1980s, membership climbs back up. And in the 80s, you're averaging about 750 members. And depending upon who revised the membership list when, I was around one time when it was 870 something. Now, how accurate that was, because it hadn't been culled in a while, but you get the idea. Lots of people. Now, in 1977, when he came, of course, the attendance was low. By the way, wouldn't you like to have the church budget then? $53,000, that's it. And Fred Schmidt could easily write the few checks he had to in about an hour. Don't try that today. By 1980, you were regularly worshiping about 450. It came down a bit in the latter part of the 80s, but the budget did not. And in 92, it was around $250,000. Okay, where are we going to go from here? The organ. Yes. Yes.
This David Adler that everybody was crying because he was leaving, why was he leaving?
Again, the details on that I cannot illuminate, and either it was because the church urgently felt they needed him somewhere else, or he felt that he had to go somewhere. I mean, it wasn't that he didn't enjoy the place. It wasn't that the place didn't enjoy him.
But you notice that all those pastors were only here 3 to 4 years.
Right.
They moved on.
Right.
How come Pastor Garner got to stay here for 31?
We got lazy. No, again, it's personal choice in part, and in part it's the larger church where they have needs. And he had a vision for growth. He sold it, and he stayed. And so we aged him. I mean, what else can you do? What else can you do? The organ was an interesting story. Pastor? What? Yeah. So, about the organ and the altar plaques, what I think you should do, really, come and look at what's available on the computer, because there's much explanation of it there. We've gone over all these things. Here's a kind of a history of the windows in the church. And guess what? I didn't mention very much the contribution of women in the church. They were the first organized. They did the most things very early on. We were one of the first churches to have a female pastor. I got Connie Helbig on there. She was the first woman elected to church council. She was also church council president. And then those other two, I don't know who they are down there. And again, just to review, the men's group comes in later as an organization. but they contributed much of the labor very early on, so maybe they were organized in that way. And so we're just about out of slides. And of course, we are enjoying our co-pastors right now. I don't think we need too much review on that, but tell me that this switchover wasn't unique. It's courage for the congregation to try it, and I think we've worked pretty well trying to adjust all the changes that this change and, of course, our pandemic has thrown at us. The last slides are just a list. They're lists of some of the church programs and outreach missions. Not to go over any of them, but just to tell you they're all there and more. And that's all you. So we end where we started. The church is you. And we thank you for all you have done for our Bethlehem Lutheran Church in Fairport. Thanks, guys.